tuhakikishie tutawasaidia pamoja na youth groups zingine ambazo zinataka kuwa form.
Kibera hakuna kitu mzuri inaweza toka.
But in that some grading, we did not have specifically what we were to do.
Walikuja tu na hiyo story ya fish na story ya choo.
No money had been lost as we nipped the activities in the bud.
Issue of the stolen password came as a result of people refusing to endorse.
So when you tell me somebody has stolen your password, it means you really gave out that password.
Vile ilikuja tu hivi corruption ikaanza, sisi ndio hawa tumerudi tu idling, wengine tunaibia watu, wengine ni mapiki pocket.
Bruce, hizi ni bunduki zimejaa.
Ilikuwa imetubizi kinda saa hii. Hii sasa ndio hii hata hawa stana walikuwa huko wanafanya tu malaya, ndio hii serikali ilikuwa inatusaidia yenyewe. Vile ilikuja tu hivi corruption ikaanza, sisi ndio hawa tumerudi tu idling, wengine tunaibia watu, wengine ni mapiki pocket, wengine wamerudi wanapiga watu ngeta. Sasa wizi imeanza tena, ilikuwa imepoa hata saa 3 unatembea, saa hii hakuna kunalala hata saa 1. Lakini wakati ilikuwa kutoka hiyo kazi ndio hiyo umechoka, unalala tu mapema asubuhi na amka unajua unaenda kazi. Juu kikuwa kwa hiyo kazi unajua uwezi iba, unajua unapata pesa kila wiki. Lakini saa hii kupata pesa ni ngumu.
The National Youth Service Program was touted as the biggest youth undertaking by the Jubilee government. The multi-billion shilling facelift of the service was supposed to announce that there was a new sheriff in town. NYS was to be one of the key cornerstones of President Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy. The program saw the government revamp a youth project whose initial blueprint had gathered dust in government shelves for more than 2 decades.
What has passed, Your Excellency?
The lead can now report that indeed the NYS youth program was a well thought out idea, but whose implementation went terribly wrong. This as greedy state officers colluded with crafty tenderpreneurs to turn it into a cash cow, one they milked dry within just a few months. The project was to create jobs for thousands of young men and women joining the National Youth Service, and also create an avenue for business for millions others across the country.
Mimi nataka niwahakikishie tutawasaidia pamoja na youth groups zingine ambazo zinataka kuwa form, mkuje tushirikiane, mtusaidie muanze mambo ya ukulima na mambo mengine.
President Kenyatta himself led the recruitment drive as a new look NYS complete with the new mandate was rolled out. The new National Youth Service oversaw a double intake of recruits at the National Treasury. Allocation to the Ministry of Devolution doubled. The program was rolled out in several slum areas and low-income towns in the country. With a new regalia for the recruited servicemen and women, NYS transformation agenda was right at the center of the Jubilee Administration Manifesto. In Kibera, one of the largest informal settlements in the country, youth were lining up for work. From cleaning and opening up of trenches to construction of feeder roads, the NYS youth program was taking root in the slum. Jabir Boje was born and raised at the heart of the Kibera slums.
Wakatuletea project 2014, it was on 2014 December. Tukaanza kwanza construction ya macho. Baada hizo choo tukajenga hii nini nyumba unaiona, alafu tukaletwa makontena za samaki.
Jabir says the putting up of ablution blocks gave way to a new idea: fish farming done in makeshift ponds. The small space here and the new makeshift fish ponds had more than 300 fingerlings when the project was launched.
Hapo ndio tulianza kuadvertise nini, tukaanza kuambia majirani wetu tunauza samaki nini. Walikuwa wanazinunua mara ya kwanza. But by time kama pia business pia ikaanza kuwa low nini. Sawa customer wako wanakujaga. Alafu gava pia wako wanatuletea food. Wako wanatuletea madaktari kuja kuona hizo masamaki, lakini tangu kufika mahali kazi kasimama, bahati mbaya kazi kasimama. Sasa tangu hiyo siku gawaje ileta hizo vitu kama hizo, na hapo wametuelezea hapa tunaweza pata access ya vitu kama chakula ya samaki ama madaktari kuja kuona hizo samaki.
The taps also ran dry. In 2016, the project has stalled. The only fish pond here contains less than 50 fish. Jabil told the lead, the fish farming is the last project that represents the face of the National Youth Service Program for him and the group he oversees.
Hao walikuwa kama wamekuja kama wamejipanga. Walikuja kama wamejipanga. Walikuja tu na hiyo story ya fish na story ya choo. Wakuja kutuuliza kwanza nini za tusaidia. Kama wamekuja kama wamejipanga juu choo kwanza choo imesaidia sana. Choo imesaidia sana. Kulikuwa na disposal zingine zinaenda kwa mtaro hapo, ilikuwa inafanya mazingira yanakuwa mbaya. Choo imesaidia, lakini sasa pande ya fish au kuja kutuuliza kwanza kama tuko na idea gani. Walikuja tu wakatufungulia nini ponds za fish.
Kibera was once a busy place. If an earth mover was not burrowing through the land to make way for a new road, a truck was ferrying new construction materials into the slums. Initially, the slum was divided into several sectors, with each sector comprising at least 200 young men and women. After cleaning and constructing structures, the youth will get paid a weekly per diem, with some of it going directly into a money-saving circle. Stanley Njoroge, youth leader in Kibera, Soweto East Section, says the earth movers have stopped.
Mambo ya corruption venye iliingia, kitu ya kwanza sisi wenyewe kwanza hapo ndio tulikuwa tumeididimia kabisa na tulishuka chini kabisa. Kwa sababu gani? Tumekaa for those months zote bila kufanya kazi. And then una imagine mtu kama mimi ama watu wenye wako hapa wanafaa walipe nyumba, ana bibi, ana watoto, ana nini, but unapata ile yenye corruption imeingia, kazi imesimama. Hamjui kazi inarudi lini. Unaambiwa kesho inakaa. Monday inaisha, wiki inaenda. So unaenda at the end mwezi imeisha, unadaiwa nyumba. Unafanya nini?
The number of desperate youth out of meaningful daily employment has increased. Stanley says since the collapse of the National Youth Service Project, Soweto East, whose crime levels had hit rock bottom, is once again on an upsurge.
Bruce, hizi ni bunduki. Zimejaa. Mtaa yenyewe imekuwa sasa saa hii. Kwanza ukisema wewe ni wa Soweto saa hii na kuna harasiwa vilivyo. Kwa sababu wanaona Kibira hakuna kitu mzuri inaweza toka. Kibira hakuna mtoto mzuri anaweza toka. Ukienda hata town upatikane na kanju usiku useme wewe ni Kibira, uta regret kwa nini ulizaliwa hiyo Kibira.
Taking advantage of the fighting at the ministry over who stole what and when, crooked officials trimmed the list of beneficiaries here in Kibera.
Tulikuwa watu 225, but sasa ukifuata the real sense yenye tunafanya tuko less than 120. Unaona? Hao wengine wote wako nje. Wako nje kwa sababu gani? Walifanya biometric but wanasemekana hawakuonekana kwa data. Since platoon mwenye wanafaa kwa in charge, haizilipa watu wenye hawajawekwa kwa nini? Kwa data kulingana na sheria yao pia. Tumejaribu kupush, haijakuwa through. Unapata sasa village kai yetu mwenye alifanya biometric hajatokea kwa data, ako nje ya kazi. Yet si makosa yake, alifanya na akakonfirmiwa kila kitu, but kwenda huko zimebackfire.
The story is the same for other sectors of the slum that have placed their hope in the ambitious project as their ticket out of poverty. Abbas Mohammed was a casual observer of the undertaking that had graced television screens and newspaper pages. An NYS and youth coordinator now, Abbas told the lead that things drastically changed after the project were launched.
Naweza sema wakujagi. Sikizi wakuji. Roli zao labda ni structural labda. Tuseme ina labda wanataka kudeal na story ya barabara sana ama nini. Sasa watakuwa sana in concern na hii. Unaelewa? Wamechange your focus.
Garbage collection tools including protective gloves are now a thing of the past. The county government of Nairobi is now doing the garbage collection. Hundreds of the youth who depended on garbage collection project are now staring at a bleak future. What changed? The NYS scandal can be traced to a wide scheme of stealing that employed both technology and a weak integrated financial management system, popularly known as IFMIS. The project also looked attractive on paper, but many observers now agree that sustaining the multi-million government project was not thought through.
Well, IFMIS is actually web-based, and you can access it anywhere, because you can even use your phone to access IFMIS. But there are some restrictions, we're supposed to really be having some restrictions to make sure that nobody really accesses it. You can access to read, for example, so that you get to know how many people have actually bid for a given project in a given ministry, and how many people have been awarded. So access to reports is available to almost anybody, through the world. But access to change the things within the IFMIS system is restricted to that particular person who has a password for that ministry or that department within the government.
Those who were tasked with implementing the project exploited the greed that came with too much money in the hands of few government officials who abandoned a good idea and instead engaged in stealing funds meant for millions of poor young women and men. A deliberate exploitation of a weak procurement system and a financial management system full of loopholes. Between July and August 2013, many government officials failed to get their monthly salaries in what was widely viewed as a government running out of money. But the leaders now learned that the delay to pay civil servants was as a result of the upgrading of the now infamous Integrated Financial Management System IFMIS. The upgrade improved the efficiency of the system, but came with a cost. Data already keyed into the system was lost. It is suspected that with the loss of data from the system, fraudsters took advantage and compromised it. It was from this point on that the stealing of public funds took shape and root. IFMIS system is designed in such a way that it has several stages of control before any payment is cleared by central bank.
It was supposed to be a seamless system, which was to monitor from conceptualization of projects in government all the way up to the implementation, so that in between there is also the monitoring and evaluation of the impact of that particular project.
The system has a procurement platform where companies that have met the necessary procurement rules are keyed in. If the companies win a tender to supply, for instance, maize for a government department and goes ahead to deliver the same, a government official will raise a voucher reflecting the delivery of maize and the unit. The voucher details are keyed in the IFMIS system. After the validation, the voucher will move electronically in the system to the cashier for payment. It is here where the process moves on to the central bank, where an official referred to as an approver will again validate the voucher and its details. The last stage is an authorizer who then remits money owed the person who won the tender to supply the maize. The remittance is done electronically to a supplier's bank account. On paper, the IFMIS system looks tamper-proof, but information technology experts have told the lead the only security the system has is a password, one that a clever hacker is able to bypass. It is suspected that with weak passwords, it became easy for corrupt individuals to gain access into the system.
If you hear somebody talking about a password has been stolen, it's because they've really not been taken into training to understand what they should do. Change of passwords, quite often should actually be done so that you don't use one password from, 1st January up to, 31st of December in a year. You need to really manage.
The public has been made to believe that only some 791 million shillings was stolen from the NYS coffers, but the leader has a trail of almost 2 billion shillings stolen at the expense of millions of young struggling youth in slum areas.
IFMIS was supposed to really be also interconnected with the KRA database of all taxpayers, because right now they're not really connected. So at the end of the day, you actually lose when it comes to KRA recruiting people who are supposed to be paying taxes.
The plan was such that a financial management system for payments and procurement based at the National Youth Service headquarters was accessed by Ministry of Finance and National Treasury officials. The officials had access to the payment system, which had been said to be secure. At times, even on Saturday, a day when government offices generally do not operate.
Under the Banking Act, Central Bank also pays government, is the one that pays the government, payments. So when they request Central Bank to release checks to a given, account, it is actually, Central Bank will be releasing it into your account. Say you have an account with the National Bank, but the Central Bank is the bank for the government.
By the time the former Cabinet Secretary NYS was calling a press conference to allegedly blow the whistle on the attempted stealing of the 791 million shillings, state officials had siphoned millions of shillings through a system the government had made the country to believe was foolproof.
24 billion, 18 was for infrastructure, wages for the community youth, and the remaining, which is around seven there, it was for the recurrent issues. So that particular time, before this issue was now going to explode, we had actually cleared almost a third of that amount, three quarters of that amount. Yeah.
Layman's language, how much is that?
Layman's language, can you say 12? Around there, 12 billion. 12 billion.
Fraudsters, with the help of Ministry of Devolution officials, quickly registered new companies, with some getting paid millions of shillings way before the Registrar of Companies had fully registered their companies. Youth in slum areas were meant to be paid a daily per diem of 400 shillings, with other amounts going to a Sacco society. For instance, NYS officials opened an account with the local bank without the approval of the National Treasury, where money was channeled to and later paid out to youth through a mobile phone company. It is now emerging that some 240 million shillings was paid out to youth in various categories. Youth with national identity cards were paid 19 million shillings. Youth with identical mobile phone numbers were paid more than 19 million shillings for the rest of the money paid out to other youth for alleged excess days. The stealing of public funds did not stop there. In September 2015, 1 year later, more than 3 billion shillings had been paid out to 87,000 youth across the country. 30% of that money, totaling to 952 million shillings, was retained as savings for the young men and women, but only 300 million was confirmed to have been transferred to 57 youth circles, and the balance of 500 million shillings was meant to have been retained within the NYS Huduma bank accounts. It is emerging that only 31 million shillings was available in the bank. The Ministry of Devolution says the missing balance was borrowed internally to pay for wages in Kibera, Lamu and other water projects. The money was returned but not into the original account, but in a new account opened 5 months later. It is not clear if the money the young men and women have saved with the National Youth Service Huduma Fund and later transferred to their respective circles is safe. In what appears as Ministry of National Treasury and NYS officials having a party of looting and plundering public resources, some 300 million shillings was paid to permanent staff of the National Youth Service. Most of the money was paid to pensionable staff through a mobile phone money transfer service. As the stealing continues, the government put up a spirited fight to defend the embattled Devolution Cabinet Secretary, NYS. By this time, Kiplimo Rugut, the then NYS director, had been sent packing, and in his place, a new director had now been in office for close to 1 year.
If you're doing nothing, no one will complain about you. People who work, generally, people who can show results, generally, get a little more targeted than people who don't show results. it's a general trend.
But the work of diverting public funds had already been set in motion. The government had lost millions of shillings through dubious transaction, inflated figures, outright theft. A supply chain management assistant, Jen Wangeshi, who oversaw the NYS transformation project in Kibera, told the lead the project kicked off well but ran into trouble months later.
Some people who are not civil servants, and I remember on 3 occasions when they came to me directly, some of them, they wanted to be working with me where I was working, and then I told them we cannot work where I was, for one, because of the regulations, the government regulations. These people are interfering because they were saying that we don't have time, they want the goods to be delivered to the user directly. So you see now when things go direct, you don't see them, you don't receive them, and now you cannot account for them.
Some vendors supplied air and the ministry officials were under pressure to have them paid. Jenny Wangeshi told the lead at times they received phone calls from their senior government officials instructing them to pay.
In Kibera, I was receiving materials being delivered by NYS lorries. So from the CS office, they are the ones who are arranging, and they are the ones who made that possible. They are the ones who allocated those lorries to be coming to Kibera, now on behalf of the supplier.
It got to a point where ministry officials would not differentiate between ministry staff ferrying building materials and those contracted to do the same. By all accounts, the biggest beneficiary of the NYS money appears to have been Josephine Kabura. According to the Auditor General's report, Kabura, with 20 briefcase companies without a single employee, pocketed over 1 billion shillings in a staggering siphoning of public funds to her deep pockets. Banks played along with Kabura's schemes, at times allowing her to withdraw millions of shillings across the counter. The IFMIS system is such that before banks pay a client, as instructed by Central Bank, a phone call is made to the authorizer, the person who okayed the payment. If the calls were made, who answered them?
The issue of the stolen password actually came as a result of, people refusing to endorse in accounts, procurements. They refused to endorse. And as a result, that caused mass transfers of officers in those respective accounts for refusing to play ball.
Kabura could not remember who she gave money to and claims at times she walked into quarries to pay workers a whopping 80 million shillings in a day. Crafty National Youth Service officials devised other schemes to divert millions of shillings into personal accounts. Figures appearing on delivery notes, counter receipt vouchers, inspection and acceptance certificates had extra zeros added to them, inflating the cost of services by hundreds of millions.
This is part of the 3-kilometer tarmac road at the heart of Kibera slums that was supposed to cost the taxpayer some 79 million shillings. Crooked officials at the National Youth Service headquarters added a zero to the figure and walked away with 700 million shillings. This road was not even supposed to have been built in the first place. The stealing did not end here.
As the plunder of public resources deepened the pockets of state officials, actors in government kicked off a major cover-up campaign. At first, Devolution Cabinet Secretary at the time, NYS Guru, calling the media and told the nation there was a plan to steal the money.
I am the one who wrote to the CID asking them to investigate transactions that had been reported in the IFMIS as being suspect. To avert financial loss, the AIE holder flagged off the matter immediately he noticed it, and this prompted my action on the same. This investigation is still ongoing, but I wish to confirm that from the said transactions, no money had been lost, as we nipped the activities in the bud and were able to stop it before we lost any money.
It will later emerge that indeed money was lost, and it was more than 791 million shillings, whose theft the former Cabinet Secretary NYS Guru had initially said her ministry had stopped. First, it was the Deputy Director of the National Youth Service, Hadan Harake, who claimed that his password had been stolen. The man who had been seconded to the NYS by the ministry claimed his password was used to siphon the 791 million shillings out of the financial management system.
You know, the payment has 25 stages. By the time I was at that end, we do it up to 14 stages. And then the remaining stages up to 25 is at the ministry. So when somebody now initiates that document, it goes now to Halake. And it's Halake now to approve, and then now the payment continues. So this is the time when now he says, instead of it being sent to him to approve, somebody used the password to approve on behalf.
It was during Harake's tenure that most of the stealing of public funds took place. The Criminal Investigations Department then swung into action, summoning senior and junior officers from the ministry. Out of its recommendations, several ministry officials were suspended, but raids in the houses of the suspects were marked by allegations that police officers were stealing money from suspects. With Josephine Kabura, the hairdresser at the center of the NYS camp, claiming that the banking fraud police boss, Joseph Mogwanja, was allegedly given 80 million shillings from the NYS loot. Josephine Kabura maintaining it was NYS who instructed her to give out the money. The National Police Service promised to investigate the matter. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission summoned the police boss, but nothing happened. Joseph Mogwanja is still in office. Senior and junior accountants at the Ministry of Devolution complained about the number of contracts that were awarded to a select few individuals without following proper procurement laws. But away from the numbers at the ministry and the National Youth Service head office, the country was treated to a public display of work being undertaken by the ministry. Frequent visits by top government officials became the order of the day. Then in came the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The commission, now headed by a newly appointed chairman, Philip Kinisu, a highly decorated man, promised to investigate and prosecute those behind the NYS scandal. But the Ethics and Anti-Corruption boss was a beneficiary of the NYS proceeds. His company had been paid millions of shillings from the NYS kitty. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption boss was also at the center of money laundering claims leveled against the African Population and Health Research Center, APHRC, a non-profit research corporation where he was also a chairman.
To work with him because he brings a great, incredible wisdom and guidance to us as an organization, as board chair. Again, we cannot and we should not get to conclusions based on allegations that has not been substantiated. So if there are, we have within our board manuals codes of conduct. If somebody has been convicted of a criminal offense, then they have to step down.
The commission took to court some National Youth Service officials, with some facing abuse of office charges and all the serious crime of corruption. NYS was cleared by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. A letter from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission clearing her was addressed to the head of the civil service. Waiguru, who was once a whistleblower turned suspect and later witness, claiming she had nothing to do with the scandal. But back in Kibera and other towns where the project had kicked off, there were concerns about lack of an elaborate plan to see through the NYS project to their final end. For instance, in Kibera, the Ministry of Devolution appears to have kicked off a fish farming project without figuring out the source of water and food for the hundreds of fishing ponds it had set up. Then there was the argument that building of permanent ablution blocks better off than the shanty structures that residents of Kibera had called homes for decades. There are tangible signs that something was working here. Structures that started defining and giving the slum a new look and a new name.
Ulikuwa unalipwa kujenga project itakusaidia. Sasa hii bado ni clean up, tukiendelea kungoja hizo construction zilikuwa tumeanza ziishe.
But the faces of those the projects were designed to help tell a different story. Corruption has cut short a good idea, whose implementation will have seen a new look informal settlement in the heart of the city. The government maintains the NYS transformation agenda is still on course and has in fact allocated more funds to its projects. But for many of these young people and thousands across the country, the trust has been broken and government promises now ringing hollow. Can the project that once held so much promise for Kenya's youth get back on track, or has it been permanently consumed by the vicious dragon of corruption? One that now rules every fabric of the Kenyan life.
Break. Hakuna nini, choo zetu haziku function cause ya sewer line hazikuwa zimeconnectiwa maji, alafu kuna zile finishing za mwisho zilikuwa zimebaki. That's why sasa unasikia phase 2 walikuwa wasema tunakaa chini tupeane hiyo nini budget tena warudie tena wafanyie nini waifanish. Mahali pamebaki wamalizie. Barabara hata iko imaliziwa ndio wanataka kumalizia. So tuna hope kama wataweka mikakati yenye inafaa watamaliza on time na itakuwa imetusaidia.
The dreams and hopes of millions of young people around the country. Dennis Onsarigo, The Lead, KTN News.